What is the scariest experience you've had in your life that you believe can only be attributed to the paranormal? Story 1. The scariest paranormal experience I've ever had happened in what should have been the safest place, my childhood church. I was probably 16 at the time and stayed late one evening to help clean up after youth group. Most people had left, and I was in the main sanctuary putting away chairs. That's when I first noticed what I can only describe as the darkness. Not regular darkness, this was something else entirely. It started as this spot near the back corner that seemed to absorb light. Like when you look at a bright bulb too long and get that dark spot in your vision. Except this was fixed in one location regardless of where I looked. The feeling that came with it was pure dread. My skin started crawling and I got goosebumps even though the building was warm. It felt malevolent in a way that's hard to explain, like something was studying me with bad intentions. I turned away for maybe 30 seconds to grab another stack of chairs, and when I looked back, it had moved. Closer. The darkness was now occupying a space about 10 feet nearer to where I was standing. That's when I really started to panic. I'd experienced this phenomenon before at home on our farm, seeing it in fields during late night walks, but it had never felt actively hostile like this. And it had definitely never moved before. Usually it would just sit there in the distance, unnerving but not directly threatening. My friend Sarah was still there finishing up in the kitchen, and I called out to her without taking my eyes off the spot. She came into the sanctuary and immediately asked what was wrong. Apparently I'd gone completely pale. When I pointed to where I was seeing it, she said she couldn't see anything specific but felt really cold looking in that direction. We left pretty quickly after that. I never stayed late at church alone again, and I made sure Sarah knew why. To this day, nearly 20 years later, I still get that same feeling of dread when I remember looking at that impossible darkness knowing it was looking back at me. Story 2. This is going to sound totally crazy but I swear it's true. When I was about 8 years old, I started having these really intense dreams about this house I'd never seen before. It was this 2-story place with blue shutters and a big oak tree in the front yard. In the dreams, I'd always be standing on the porch looking through the front window, and I could see this family inside, a mom, dad, and little girl about my age. The weird part was that every time I had the dream, something terrible was about to happen to them. Like I could sense it but couldn't do anything to warn them. I'd try to knock on the door or yell through the window but they couldn't hear me. Then I'd wake up feeling sick to my stomach. This went on for maybe 3 years. Same house, same family, same feeling of dread. My parents thought I was just having nightmares and didn't think much of it. Then when I was 11, we moved to a new town about 2 hours away. On our first day there, my dad was driving us around to show us the neighborhood. We turned onto this street and I immediately felt weird. Then I saw it, the exact house from my dreams. Same blue shutters, same oak tree, everything. I made my dad stop the car and I just stared at it. There was a for sale sign in the yard and the windows were all dark. When I asked the neighbors about it later, they said the family who lived there had been in a car accident about a year ago. All 3 of them didn't make it. I've never had the dream since. Story 3. I need to share what happened to me a few years back because it still freaks me out. My friends and I were driving back from clubbing around 2:30 a.m. on this mostly empty freeway. There was construction going on, so they had these temporary walls up that blocked your view around this one curved section. I was doing about 80 inches the second lane from the left, and neither of us were wearing seatbelts because we were young and stupid. As we went into the curve, I suddenly got this really strong urge to move into the far left lane. No real reason for it, just felt like I needed to hug the inside of the turn tighter. So without even signaling, I switched lanes. Literally a split second later, we passed a car that was completely stopped in the lane I'd just been in. Dead stopped, no lights on, just sitting there in the middle of the freeway. We went by so fast that I had to ask my friend, "Did you see that?" He was like, "Yeah, holy crap, we would have been toast." The whole thing was so random. Why would I suddenly decide to change lanes for no reason? And what kind of psycho parks their car on a freeway with no lights? My friend said give it up for God, man, and honestly, I think he was right. Later found out there had been a bunch of incidents like that in our area, stolen cars left on highways with the lights off. Some sick people apparently liked watching the crashes from the woods. Makes my skin crawl thinking about how close we came to being part of their twisted game. Whatever made me change lanes that night, I'm just grateful it did. Story 4. The house I grew up in had this really long, narrow hallway that connected the living room to all the bedrooms. During the day it was fine, but at night you'd hear footsteps following you up and down that hall even when you were alone. We all just accepted it as part of living there. But the really terrifying stuff happened in my parents' bedroom at the far end. From the time we moved in when I was 3, I was absolutely terrified of that room. Something about it felt fundamentally wrong, like there was something angry trapped in there that didn't want us around. My mom experienced the worst of it. She'd get slapped hard enough to leave marks and would sometimes get dragged right out of bed in the middle of the night. The door would rattle violently like something was trying to get in or out. We'd hear crashes and banging coming from in there even when both my parents were sitting with us in the living room. The weirdest incident happened when I was around 12. My dad was sleeping in my brother's room across the hall and could see diagonally into my room. He told me the next morning that he'd looked over to check on me and our dog, but instead of seeing us sleeping, there was apparently a whole party going on in my room. He described people in old-fashioned clothes drinking cocktails and socializing like it was some kind of gathering from decades ago. He said when one of the party guests noticed him watching from the doorway, they all just vanished instantly. Gone. Just me and the dog sleeping peacefully like nothing had happened. The thing is, I have zero memory of any of this. No dreams, no awareness of anything unusual that night. But my dad was completely serious about what he saw, and he's not the type to make stuff up or even believe in paranormal things normally. We lived with this stuff for years until we finally moved when I was in high school. Looking back, I have no idea how we stayed as long as we did. Moving is expensive and difficult, but some things aren't worth dealing with just to keep a roof over your head. Story 5. I used to get what doctors called sleep paralysis pretty regularly in my early 20s, especially when I was stressed. Most episodes were just the usual: couldn't move, felt scared, maybe saw some vague shapes. But one experience was completely different and I still can't rationalize it away. I was crashing at my friend's apartment after a party, sleeping on his couch. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to that familiar feeling of being unable to move. But this time, instead of the usual panic, I felt this overwhelming urge to just let go and see what would happen. Everyone always said to fight it, but something inside me was curious. The moment I stopped resisting, everything changed. Instead of just lying there paralyzed, I started having these incredibly vivid thoughts about getting up and going to the kitchen. But these weren't my thoughts, they felt foreign, invasive. I could picture myself walking down the hall, opening drawers, looking for something sharp. The urge to find a knife was so strong, so focused. I could visualize going to my friend's bedroom door. That's when pure terror kicked in. These violent thoughts weren't coming from me, but they felt so real and compelling. It was like something else was in my head, using my imagination against me. The thoughts got more detailed and specific, exactly which drawer had the knives, exactly how to get to his room quietly. I fought back mentally with everything I had, pushing against these intrusive thoughts. It felt like wrestling with something that was way stronger than me, something that really wanted to hurt my friend. I kept telling myself over and over, these aren't my thoughts, this isn't me. I finally snapped out of it, gasping and drenched in sweat. My friend was still asleep down the hall, completely unaware. I sat up the rest of the night, too scared to close my eyes again. The worst part was how detailed and persuasive those violent thoughts felt. They had a logic and planning to them that felt completely alien. I've never given in to another episode after that. Some mental doors are better left closed, even if you're curious about what's behind them. Story 6. This happened when I was about 19, working at a restaurant in my hometown. One of my coworkers was this really sweet older lady named Margaret who had worked there for like 15 years. Everyone loved her. She was basically the mom of the whole place. Margaret had been feeling sick for a few weeks but kept coming to work anyway because she needed the money. One Thursday night after we closed, I was cleaning tables when I suddenly got this overwhelming urge to check on her. She lived alone and I knew she had been looking pretty rough lately. I almost talked myself out of it because it was past 11 p.m. and I didn't want to bother her. But the feeling was so strong I couldn't ignore it. I drove to her apartment and knocked on the door. No answer. I could see her TV was on through the window, so I knew she was home. I ended up asking the building manager to do a wellness check. When we got inside, we found Margaret unconscious on her kitchen floor. She had been there for hours. Apparently she had a heart attack while making dinner and couldn't get to her phone. The paramedics said if we had found her even 30 minutes later, she probably wouldn't have made it. She spent 2 weeks in the hospital and had to have surgery, but she recovered completely. She always jokes that I'm her guardian angel, but honestly I think it was the other way around. The weird thing is, I found out later that Margaret's daughter had been trying to call her all evening but couldn't get through. She told me she had been praying for someone to check on her mom because she had this terrible feeling something was wrong. Margaret's doing great now. She retired from the restaurant and moved closer to her daughter, but we both still get chills when we talk about that night. There's no logical explanation for why I suddenly needed to go check on her at exactly the right moment. Story 7. This story still gives me chills thinking about it. I was supposed to go see a movie with my best friends in a town about an hour and a half away. I love road trips and never turned down a chance to hang out, but something just felt off that day. I actually got in the back seat of their car and we were about to leave when this wave of anxiety hit me out of nowhere. I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was going to happen. I felt so stupid, but I bailed at the last second. Made up some excuse about not feeling well and got out of the car. My friends were annoyed, but whatever. About an hour later, I got a text that made my blood run cold. A semi had rear-ended their car on the highway. The entire back seat, where I would have been sitting, was completely crushed up to the front seats. Both my friends survived but were pretty banged up. I've never had a gut feeling that strong before or since. It's like something was screaming at me not to get in that car. Call it intuition, call it whatever you want, but I'm convinced something was looking out for me that day. Makes me wonder how many times we ignore those little warning signs our subconscious picks up on. Story 8. I was about 16 and riding dirt bikes with some friends way up in the mountains in Colorado. This place was seriously in the middle of nowhere, like you had to take a 4x4 trail for 10 miles just to get to the trailhead, then another 10 miles on single track to get where we were going. We're about halfway through the trail when it starts drizzling a bit. The trail here gets really narrow with a rock wall on one side and a crazy drop-off on the other. We come around this corner and there's this guy just standing in the middle of the trail. But here's the thing, this dude was dressed like he was from the 1800s or something. Full fancy suit with tails, top hat, and he's holding an umbrella. Just standing there in the middle of nowhere like it's totally normal. All 5 of us slow way down and go around him. He looked maybe early 20 seconds with these really pale blue eyes that never moved from this one spot on the ground. Never looked at us once, just kept staring at the same spot. When we got to the end of the trail we all ripped our helmets off and were like, what the heck was that? Every single one of us saw the exact same thing. On the way back we spent like half an hour looking for any sign of him, footprints, anything. There was nothing there. I still think about that guy sometimes. No way someone just randomly walks 20 miles into the mountains dressed like that. Story 9. This is going to sound completely insane, but I swear it happened exactly like this. About 6 months ago, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. I remember the time exactly because I looked at my phone. I was totally wide awake, which is weird because I'm usually dead to the world until my alarm. I had this incredibly strong urge to call my childhood best friend Sarah. We hadn't talked in probably 2 years, maybe longer. I kept telling myself it was crazy to call someone at 3 a.m., but the feeling wouldn't go away. It was like someone was literally pushing me to pick up the phone. So I called her. She answered on the first ring, which was strange enough. Her voice sounded really shaky and she was like, "How did you know to call me right now?" I told her I had no idea, just felt like I needed to talk to her. That's when she broke down crying and told me she had been sitting in her car in her garage with the engine running. She was going through a really dark time. Her mom had passed away, she'd lost her job, her relationship had ended badly. She said she was about to end it all when my call came through. She told me that hearing my voice reminded her of all the good times we had as kids, and it snapped her out of that horrible headspace. We talked for like 3 hours until the sun came up. I drove to see her that weekend and helped her find a therapist. Sarah's doing so much better now. She got a new job, she's in counseling, and we talk regularly again. But we both can't get over the timing of that call. I mean, what are the odds that I would randomly wake up at exactly the moment she needed someone most, after not talking for years? I don't know if it was her mom looking out for her, or just some crazy coincidence, but I'm just grateful I listened to whatever was telling me to make that call. Sometimes you just have to trust those weird feelings. Story 10. I work night shifts at a small office building and I'm usually the only person there after 10 p.m. About 2 months ago I started noticing weird stuff happening around 2:30 a.m. every night. It started with the elevator. I'd hear it moving between floors even though nobody else was in the building. The security cameras show the elevator doors opening and closing on the 3rd floor, but no one gets on or off, just empty space. Then I started hearing typing coming from the conference room. Steady, fast typing like someone working on a deadline, but when I'd go check, the room was dark and empty. All the computers were shut off. The scariest part happened last week. I was making my security rounds when I heard someone crying in the bathroom on the 2nd floor. Really heartbroken sobbing, like someone had just gotten devastating news. I knocked and asked if everything was okay, but the crying just stopped immediately. I opened the door and nobody was there. But all the faucets were running and the mirrors were completely fogged up with steam, even though the water was ice cold. Talked to the day shift security guard and apparently a woman who used to work here took her own life in that bathroom about 5 years ago. She just found out she was losing her job and couldn't handle it. Now I'm wondering if she's still here somehow, reliving that terrible night over and over. Story 11. So this happened about 3 years ago and I still get chills thinking about it. I had this super vivid dream where I was driving my car and suddenly went off the road, crashed through some trees, and ended up on this beach. The whole thing felt so real. I could feel the car flipping, hear the metal crunching, everything. When I woke up, I was genuinely shaken and decided not to drive for a few days. First time I got behind the wheel again, I'm driving down this road I've been on a million times when suddenly my car hits some ice. Before I know it, I'm going through the exact same thing, off the road, through trees, car flipping multiple times, and I land right on the beach. As it's happening, I'm thinking the exact same thoughts from my dream. Crap, I'm going straight down to the beach. If it's high tide, I need to get out fast or I'll drown. The weirdest part? In my dream, when people came to help me, they said my car was fine. In real life, it was completely totaled. I called my mom crying from the scene and she just goes, "Well, you did dream about this happening, didn't you?" That's when it really hit me how crazy the whole thing was. Story 12. I used to be really skeptical about paranormal stuff until this happened to me about 5 years ago. I was house sitting for my girlfriend's family friend in this older neighborhood while she was out of town. The house seemed totally normal during the day, but at night things got really weird. It started with footsteps in the hallway upstairs when I was watching TV downstairs. At first I thought maybe it was the house settling or something, but these sounded exactly like someone walking around in boots. Heavy, deliberate steps that would go back and forth for like 10 minutes at a time. The second night, I decided to investigate and went upstairs to check it out. As soon as I got to the top of the stairs, the footsteps stopped completely. But then I heard what sounded like someone moving furniture around in the bedroom at the end of the hall. When I opened the door, everything was exactly where it should be, but the room felt freezing cold even though the rest of the house was warm. On the third night, I'm making some food in the kitchen when I hear someone walking around upstairs again. But this time I also heard music, like old-timey music from the 1970 seconds or something. I grabbed my phone and recorded some of it before it stopped. When I told my girlfriend about it later, she mentioned it to her friend. Turns out the woman's father, who had passed away in that house a few years earlier, was a huge music lover and always wore these heavy work boots around the house. She said other people who had stayed there mentioned hearing similar things, but she never brought it up because she didn't want to scare anyone. Story 13. My older brother took his own life about 4 years ago. It was completely unexpected. He seemed fine, had plans for the weekend, was excited about a new job. The whole family was in shock. The day after the funeral, I was at my parents' house helping clean up. My phone was charging in the kitchen when it started making this notification sound. I checked it and saw a text message from my brother's number, which we hadn't canceled yet. The message just said "I'm okay now" followed by a smiley face emoji. I showed it to my parents and my dad immediately called the phone company. They confirmed that my brother's phone had been physically destroyed in the incident. There was no way it could send messages. But the text was definitely there, from his number, sent at a time when his phone no longer existed. What really got to me was that my brother never used emoji. He thought they were stupid and always made fun of people who used them in texts. But somehow this message had won, like he was trying to show us he really was at peace. The phone company eventually gave us some technical explanation about delayed messages in the system, but the timing was too perfect. It came exactly when our family needed to hear that he was okay, whatever that means. I kept that text for 2 years before I finally deleted it, but I'll never forget how much comfort it brought us during the worst time of our lives. Story 14. My mom bought this CD of 1940 seconds music to share songs her parents loved. She started dancing around when one particular song came on, getting all teary-eyed. She told me it was her father's absolute favorite song from when she was little. We listened to that CD probably 5 or 6 times over the next few weeks. Then one day, we wanted to hear that special song again, so we put the CD back in. We searched through every single track, it wasn't there. We checked the song list on the back of the case. Nothing. That song literally wasn't on the CD at all. We had both heard it clear as day, multiple times. My mom even sang along to it. But when we tried to find it again, it had completely vanished. Still gives me chills thinking about it. Like her dad was visiting through that music somehow. Story 15. This was about 3 days after my great-grandfather passed away. My great-grandma wasn't used to being alone in their house, so my dad and I went over to install an extra light fixture in the hallway for her. After we finished up, I took the extension cord we'd been using back down to the basement. I just tossed it onto this old table down there and started heading back upstairs. As I was climbing up, I glanced to my right and saw a pair of legs in dress slacks walking right by that table. Just the legs visible under the wall, moving like someone was casually strolling through the basement. I totally lost it and bolted upstairs past my dad and grandma, straight out of the house. They asked what was wrong, but I didn't want to scare my grandma, so I waited until we left to tell my dad. When I described the slacks, he got really quiet and told me that's exactly what they buried great-grandpa in. The crazy thing is, whenever we visited, great-grandpa was always just sitting at the kitchen table smoking and barely said a word, but apparently he spent a lot of time organizing stuff in that basement. Maybe he was just checking that I put the extension cord back where it belonged. Still scared the heck out of me though. Story 16. My grandmother died when I was 12, And about a month later something really strange happened with our old answering machine. This was back in the early 2000s, so we had one of those little boxes that recorded messages. I came home from school one day and the message light was blinking. I hit play and heard this message that was just someone humming. It went on for like 10 minutes, way longer than our machine usually recorded. The weird thing was, it sounded exactly like my grandmother's voice. She used to hum while doing dishes or folding laundry, and it was this specific tune she always did. The message ended with this little laugh, 4 notes, low to high. That was totally her. I got chills and ran to get my mom. When we tried to play it again, the message was just gone. Not deleted, just not there anymore. The caller ID showed no number, which shouldn't have been possible. Even blocked calls usually show up as private or something. This was just blank. My mom went white when I described what I heard. She said the humming sounded exactly like something grandma would do, down to the specific tune. We never got another message like that, but thinking about it still makes me wonder if she was trying to let us know she was okay. Story 17. So this is going to sound totally crazy, but I swear it's true. When I was about 8 years old, I started having these really intense dreams about this house I'd never seen before. It was this 2-story place with blue shutters and a big oak tree in the front yard. In the dreams, I'd always be standing on the porch looking through the front window, and I could see this family inside, a mom, dad, and little girl about my age. The weird part was that every time I had the dream, something terrible was about to happen to them. Like I could sense it but couldn't do anything to warn them. I'd try to knock on the door or yell through the window but they couldn't hear me. Then I'd wake up feeling sick to my stomach. This went on for maybe 3 years. Same house, same family, same feeling of dread. My parents thought I was just having nightmares and didn't think much of it. Then when I was 11, we moved to a new town about 2 hours away. On our first day there, my dad was driving us around to show us the neighborhood. We turned onto this street and I immediately felt weird. Then I saw it, the exact house from my dreams. Same blue shutters, same oak tree, everything. I made my dad stop the car and I just stared at it. There was a for sale sign in the yard and the windows were all dark. When I asked the neighbors about it later, they said the family who lived there had been in a car accident about a year ago. All 3 of them didn't make it. I've never had the dream since. Story 18. This happened during my sophomore year of high school. Me and my friends thought it would be cool to do some kind of paranormal investigation at the old cemetery on the edge of town. We didn't have any real equipment, just our phones and a couple flashlights. We're walking around looking at old headstones when we hear this voice, "Excuse me, young man," really clear and polite. We turn around and there's this elderly woman standing by a tree. She's wearing a long white dress that looks really old-fashioned. "I seem to have lost my way," she says. "Could you help me find the entrance?" The weird thing was, we had just walked past that exact spot like 5 minutes earlier, and there was definitely nobody there. Plus, the entrance to the cemetery was clearly visible from where we were standing. My friend Jake starts to walk toward her to help, but something made me grab his arm. "Wait," I whispered. "Look at her feet." She was standing in a patch of mud from recent rain, but there were no footprints around her, none at all. And her dress was completely clean and dry. "I really do need help finding my way home," she says again, and starts walking toward us. That's when we noticed she wasn't making any sound when she moved. No footsteps, no rustling clothes, nothing. We backed away slowly and then just ran. When we looked back from the parking lot, she was gone. We never saw her leave or disappear. She was just there 1 second and gone the next. The next week, I asked my grandmother about the cemetery since she'd lived in town her whole life. She told me that back in the 1960s, an elderly woman with dementia had wandered away from her house near the cemetery. They found her 3 days later, but she had passed away from exposure. According to my grandmother, people have been reporting seeing her ever since, always asking for help finding her way home. Story 19. This happened during my college years when I was living in this run-down apartment complex. My roommate had gone home for the weekend, so I was alone, trying to catch up on studying. I was up late working on a paper when I started hearing these weird scratching sounds coming from inside the walls. At first I thought it might be mice, but the sounds were too loud and rhythmic. It sounded like someone was literally clawing at the drywall from the inside. The scratching would start around midnight and go on for hours. I tried banging on the walls to make it stop, but it would just pause for a few seconds then start up again. After 3 nights of this, I was exhausted and getting really freaked out. The 4th night, I decided to figure out exactly where the sound was coming from. I put my ear against different spots on the wall until I found where it was loudest, right behind my bed. The scratching was so intense it felt like whatever was doing it was trying to break through. Then everything went quiet. That's when I heard this really faint voice saying "help me" over and over again. It was coming from the same spot in the wall. I completely lost it and called my roommate, who thought I was having some kind of breakdown from stress, but he agreed to come back the next day. When he got there, we decided to ask the apartment manager about it. Turns out there had been some kind of accident during construction years ago. A worker had gotten trapped in the space between the walls during renovation and wasn't found for several days. The manager said they'd sealed up that area after the incident. We asked if they could check it out, and maintenance found old scratch marks in the wood framing and some personal items that belonged to the worker. The manager said they'd make sure the area was properly sealed. After that, the scratching stopped completely. I always wondered if maybe he just wanted someone to know what happened to him. The whole thing really messed with my head for a while. Story 20. So this is about 15 and still creeps me out to this day. I was staying up late playing video games in our living room when I saw something move in my peripheral vision. I turned toward the kitchen doorway, and there was this elderly woman just standing there, smiling at me. She had gray hair in a bun and was wearing like this old-fashioned dress. The weird part was that she didn't look scary at all. She actually seemed really kind and just waved at me before slowly fading away from her feet up to her head. I just sat there completely frozen, wondering if I was losing my mind or something. I didn't tell anyone about it for months because I thought they'd think I was crazy, but then my mom mentioned meeting some neighbors who used to live in our house before we moved in. Apparently they had asked if we'd ever seen the nice old lady who used to appear in the kitchen sometimes. Turns out the previous owner's grandmother had passed away in our house like 20 years before we moved in. She was known for being incredibly sweet and always baking cookies for the neighborhood kids. The neighbors said she probably just wanted to make sure the new family was settling in okay. I never saw her again after that night, but sometimes I swear I can smell fresh baked cookies in the kitchen for no reason.